So before I start, so yeah, my name is Steve Pogrebivsky. I'm based in Philadelphia, so not quite ready for wine and beer yet, but I'm sure that's a few hours away. But if you are, please enjoy. These presentations are always better with a beverage. So I'm going to break this presentation up into two parts. The first part, I'm going to tell you a little bit about machine learning, a little bit about how we use it, why we use it. We actually use several aspects of artificial intelligence, not just machine learning, but I have only limited amount of time, so I'll talk about primarily that. Once I get past the slides, I'm going to do a quick demo of the product. I'll try to make it as comprehensive as I can, but again, I'll have to limit some things. I'll take some questions. My contact information is on these slides, and if anybody wants to get in touch with me afterwards, please do. So just to give you a little background, so I have been an avid Salesforce user for about 15 years. I've never really, although my background is fairly technical, I've never really worked in terms of in an admin capacity with Salesforce until about 6 years ago. A previous company I'd worked for was acquired by a competitor, and because I'm semi-technical, they decided to assign me the job of merging our two orgs, and I had three other people working on this who were actually a little bit more competent than I was with Salesforce. We spent just under 6 months doing it. We had 2.3 million records. We thought about 500,000 of them were duplicates. So after the 6 months period, we eliminated about 40% of those. But we added another 200,000 records that we thought were duplicates. So it was really a very complicated job. The tools we used were, they were great, but it took so much time and effort. So I just thought this was a great opportunity to sort of do something different. And that's exactly what Data Groomer is. So let me start off a little bit telling you some background. So it's just some statistics, some challenges. 2/3 of all businesses rely on a CRM system. I guess we all wouldn't be here if that wasn't the case. 33% have over 100,000 records. So our experience is that we have people ranging from as few as 9,000 records to as many as 27 million, with the majority way over 100,000. So I don't even know how accurate that is for Salesforce. The databases seem to double every 12 to 18 months. Again, that hasn't been my experience, but definitely 2 to 3 year period, we see a doubling of all databases. The bad thing is that 40% of all data, or all leads especially, have bad data. Now some bad data, all data is not equivalent. So some bad data, it's hard to fix, but duplication is something that is fixable. And that's something that we're taking on. And basically the biggest challenge, if you ask any marketer or any salesperson, is having bad data or having duplicate data, because they end up marketing to the same person multiple times. They end up sending the wrong information. You have salespeople that are competing for the same customer. So there's all kinds of issues that arise from having duplicates and bad data overall. So what are your options for doing data cleansing? So if you do have duplicates, so you have a couple options. So the first option is basically what we call a qualitative approach, which is rule-based. And I have a screenshot from Salesforce, which uses specifically this qualitative approach. You create a rule, set up some fields that you want to look at. So in this case, we set up company, email, phone number, mobile, and then you set up a matching method. So Salesforce, you got two, which is fuzzy, something similar, or exact. And then you set up a logic. So what combination of these makes up a duplicate? So in this case, we said, well, if the companies somewhat match and the phone numbers match, whether it's phone or mobile, then it's a duplicate. Or if the email is an exact match, it's a duplicate. The problem with this, well, there's many problems with this, is that this covers a very small set of scenarios. For example, sometimes people enter incorrect email addresses, or they misspell them or something like that. The same thing for phone numbers, and you end up losing them, and they end up being still a duplicate record. So the other option that's available is a quantitative method. And quantitative essentially uses some type of statistics. What I showed you here is a little simple demo of what you generally see. As you can see, we have some records, this record P1, P2, and P5. there's similarities in the name, there's similarities in a zip code or postal code, and there's, there's some relevance in the income, and you can create a correlation between those three. Others like this one, which are identical, P3 and P4, the correlation is perfect, and some records are just individual. But basically, you can take all these correlations and based on some algorithm decide that, well, we can combine these into these three records. So that's more of a quantitative approach, which is what Data Groomer does. So just a little comparison between a rule-based approach and a quantitative or the one we use, which is basically machine learning approach. So the pros are you can create unlimited number of rules. So there's no limit to how many rules you can create. That's also a problem because well, there's two problems. Number one, it's impossible to create enough rules to cover every condition. So that's the problem we were suffering in our scenario. As soon as we would identify a rule where we could be sure that something is a duplicate, people will come up with something else. And we were getting a lot of duplicates coming in from a lot of different sources. There were conferences, we were getting feeds from our marketing automation system. So there was constant overload on data, and the leads were just growing. And there was just no way for us to track them. The other thing, the more rules you have, the more you have to maintain them. So sometimes we would find small variations in what caused the duplicate, and we could adjust the rule, but again, that required maintenance. The other problem with it is that really you need data that's somewhat standardized or normalized. So you can't really have things that are completely different, or abbreviations like for a system, although there's a way to create lookup lists. For a system, for example, it's very hard to identify that IBM is also International Business Machine. So there is a requirement to have some standardization, normalization to your data. So if you look at the AI side, there's really no need to create rules. So we do have models, and I'll show you how to create those models. But essentially, once you find a model that works for you, that's all you need. You don't need to create multiple models. The other benefit is the model constantly improves. So based on your feedback, there's an improvement process that goes on automatically. I'll show you how that works in our product. So the model actually tunes itself over time and gets better. And you can support any object just like you can, and if you create a quantitative tool, qualitative tool. But in essence, there is a way to support any object. The other thing with when you have rules that compare a lot of data, there's really they become inefficient as your data size increases. So the more data you have, the longer it will take to analyze. And that to some degree is also true with AI, but there's ways to sort of create compartments for the data. And I'll show you how we do that. And the nicest thing is that normalization is not required. So what machine learning does is it looks at your Salesforce records sort of in a homogeneous way, where it says, well, look, all these fields are important, and let's compare all these fields to all the other fields. Some fields have more importance, some fields have less importance, but essentially, even if the two, let's say the company name is IBM versus International Business Machines, it will use address, it will use phone numbers, it will use contact information. So the combination of all the other data will make it easier to identify a duplicate. So there really isn't any need to normalize the data in any way. Okay, so what is machine learning? I mean, let's just start with the basics, right? So machine learning is basically, it's a form of artificial intelligence. Some call it a subset, but there's many different forms. You can have neural networks, you can have many other things, but machine learning is a form. And basically what it does is it learns your action and creates a pattern to them. It identifies an algorithm, a mathematical algorithm that can basically duplicate what a human being does. And then the other thing is that essentially it improves. As you do things, if you interact with these algorithms, they improve over time. So essentially, it's trying to duplicate what you do. And that's the nice thing about it. It's not sort of a self-learning, but it does learn from you, and it does improve based on what you've taught it. The other thing, again, this is true for any computer model at all, but once you have a model, it's going to work every time, right? So there is no, people get tired. Sometimes they miss things, which was a big problem for us, but people just entered duplicates accidentally. But, there is really no human interaction that has to happen except the initial training. So once you do that, the system will just identify duplicates, and you can just review them, or you don't have to review them, and it will always do it correctly. But machine learning is not without challenges. And essentially there's three core challenges to what machine learning does. Number one is, how do we know something is similar? Now, I use names because that's something easier to understand, but that's the complicated part. How do we know that something like IBM and International Business Machines is similar? So there's a few ways to do that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Number two is, look, you're working when you're developing a model for Salesforce, there's multiple fields involved. And you need to determine which fields are more important than others. And that's an important part of the weighing of those fields is an important part of creating a model. And finally, there's a lot of data. People have a lot of data in Salesforce. And again, the more data there is, the more complex it gets to define that. So I'll show you how we kind of get around that problem, or how machine learning gets around that problem. So let me start off with names. So there's essentially three different ways with names, or just any kind of fields that has a string in it to identify that something is the same. The first one is called string similarity. There's a couple models that use string similarities. More common ones are something called Hamming distance, and there's another one called Levenshtein distance. And basically they compare the two strings, and they either determine the distance between them. So if you have equal length strings, it can determine the distance between positions of letters. Or the other one basically says that, look, how many transformations do I need to get from one word to another? So for example, if you look at Stephen with a PH versus Stephen with a V, you have to remove the P and H and add a V. So that's 3 steps. If you're going simply from Stephen to Steve, you only have 1 step because you just have to remove and add. So those are sort of like a simple approach to how we determine that something is similar based on the string itself. The second part, come on, okay, is a set similarity. So a set similarity basically looks at, it looks at the words that are inside between, well, in this case, again, we're using names, and there's a couple different ways to do it. There's one called the Jacquard index. There's another one called the Sorensen dice. And it basically says that if many of the same words are the same, then the meaning of this entire sentence or this entire composition of words has to be similar. So those are the models that are used to determine that. And again, so in this case, we use my current president, I think, Joe Biden, Joseph Robinette Biden. Again, many of the words are the same. So it's fairly clear for a model to assume that those are the same. The last one is semantic similarity. And basically semantic similarity, it's a metric that's defined over a set of terms. And the idea is that, how likely is the meaning of these words the same based on the semantics, based on what it's used for in a sentence. So a good example of this, so, it's very hard to determine that Margaret and Maggie are the same thing. But if you look at the sentence or the context of the sentence, so the Margaret is a Salesforce admin at Ajax, and you can say Maggie works with Salesforce at Ajax. There's some similarity between that. So you can create a relative model based around that says, look, okay, if these two have these words and they're surrounded by them, then they may be similar. So that's similarity, how we find out that something is similar. And besides this, there's at least 180 other ways to do it. So we implement many of them in Data Groomer. So the other part is, how do we determine which fields are more important? So really the only way to do that is to actually train your model. So that's the process that happens here. You can either start with data that's been trained, and by trained, I mean you've identified something is a duplicate or not a duplicate, or you can just feed data into a model with somebody reviewing it and saying, yes, this is a duplicate or not a duplicate. And that's, by the way, how we do it. So we have created some models that we think work, but that once you train it, it becomes, we create an algorithm, which is down here. And then you basically have a review period. So you input real data into this machine learning algorithm. It makes a prediction of whether something is a duplicate or not. And you can evaluate it, yes or no. So that's how a model is essentially created in machine learning. And the machine learning is the human person that's participating in this process. We also, the secondary part of assigning the value or the weighting to fields is part of the active learning process. So if the model is watching you and you're saying, well, something is not a match, something is not a duplicate, and you're doing that and it sees a pattern based on the fields, it will lower the weight to some fields and increase the weight to other fields. So it will adjust based on what you are doing over time as well. So the last part of this is, how do we deal with large amounts of data? So just to give you an idea of the scope of how much data there is, this is something that actually happened to me in real life. So we started with a small org that had 50,000 records, and we wanted to import 5,000 records into it. So if you were going to do a simple matching rule, which said compare every record to every other record, that's 250 million comparisons. I know that, you know, CPUs have become cheaper and memory has become cheaper, but this is still going to take you a bit of time. So the technique that is used in machine learning is something called blocking. And blocking is basically when you compare records that have a specific trait or something in common. So the example we use here is the first 3 letters of the name. So I don't know if, again, I'm sorry, because this is I'm a little bit aligned more to the US, but Jay Leno, who used to be a comedian, I think he's still around, but plays with cars these days. Jay-Z, musician, and Jason Tatum, who are basketball players, their names all start with J-Y. So the system might block them out and say, okay, instead of comparing every record to every record, let's compare just this block of records. So this is a very simple approach, but that's essentially what the system does in order to avoid comparing every record to every other record. So what are the benefits of using machine learning? So, I mean, first of all, it's simple. So there's no complex rules to set up, and there's definitely no complex rules to maintain. There's no standardization or normalization required. We actually do offer that in our product as customers have asked us, but it's not required for any deduplication. And the more you use it, the better it gets. And it's efficient. So once you have a model trained, it will just identify the duplicates. You'll see, like if you ever trial our product, or you'll see based on my demo, when you come into the product and connect it to your org, it will start searching and identify duplicates for you without any input from you whatsoever. And finally, it's accurate. Again, it doesn't really make mistakes. It's a computer. As long as you train it properly, the model will work each and every time. All right, let me move. I want to make sure I leave some time for the demo, so let me switch for that. There's a couple different ways to enter the product. You can install it from the App Exchange, and then essentially it will be a tab in your Salesforce instance. You can go to press free trial, which will take you to this page, or you can just go to app.datagroomer.com. Regardless of what you do, this is the page you'll see. We use Salesforce authentication in the background, so you can log directly into your prod environment, or if you have a sandbox that you want to play with, you can just log in there. I'm going to log into our prod environment. Again, I'm sure you've seen this before. This is basically your Salesforce UI, but that's the last time you'll actually see Salesforce. So what you will see is something that looks like this. Yours may not look like that. Well, probably will not look like this initially, because we have these widgets that give you some information. A lot of this information is historical, so we show you your duplicate counts over time. I don't have many changes here because I don't actually do any merges in the demo, but you know, yours would change. If you're actually doing merges, you'll see this line graph will reflect that. And this gives you a snapshot of your current duplication status. So again, none of these will actually be available because you'll start from nothing. But what you will see is we will immediately start looking for duplicates in your leads, contacts, and accounts. The reason for that is because we've developed models or algorithms for those 3 objects. They're crowdsourced. So we started with 20 beta users. They helped us develop the algorithm over a couple of year period, and then it just constantly improves. So we give you these models. Now, there are some reasons when you may want to create your own models, but you'll start off with ours in any case. How do the model? So as I mentioned, if you click on Trimmer directly, you'll see a little dashboard. As I mentioned, these 3 will be created for you by default, but we also do allow you to create your own, what we call data sets. So we have 2 types of data set, a single object data set or a cross object data set. Start off with a single object data set. So the way it works is that you can create any object. So as I said, we support lead, contacts, and accounts, but any custom object that's created can be used as well. The only thing is for custom objects, you do need, we don't have a model for those. So you will have to train a model, and I will show you how to do that a little bit later. Once you decide on which object you want, you can select which fields are displayed. So these are the fields that you will see if you compare records side by side. They're not necessarily the ones used for deduplication. Again, I'll show you how to define those later. Filter. So if you want to filter some data, so for example, in my case, let's say I only want to see contacts that are in Canada because I want to assign that deduplication to my general manager in Canada. So we have this little handy dandy thing where you can say which fields, and then you can create a filter condition. So in this case, I'm just going to say Canada. Press apply. We'll tell you how many records actually are based in Canada. And that's the way you can create a filter for it. We also support, if you're more comfortable with SOQL, we support it here. You can just enter it by hand. So these two things, merge rules and matching rules, I'm going to talk about in detail a little bit later, but I just want to touch base on them initially. So merge rules are the rules on how records will be merged. So if you found a group and you want to merge them, this tells it how to actually do that. And there's two types of rules. There's a master record selection rule, which tells it master record is the one that will survive. So if you have a group which has 5 records, 4 of them will be deleted ultimately, and 1 will survive. And this tells it how the one that will survive will be selected. This tells you how to populate the data in that master record. So you can copy data from child records, the ones that will be deleted, to the master record. You can arrange it in any variety of ways. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later, but you can create these rules out of the box. We give you 2 to begin with. I'll show you what they look like a little bit later again. So matching rules is a misnomer. We don't have matching rules. What we have is machine learning models, but everybody else calls them matching rules, so we just went along. If you have created your own custom models, they'll appear here, and you can select one and assign it. Again, I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. So that's about it. Once you're ready, you press save, and this system will start looking for duplicates in this. The other thing we do offer is a cross-object data set. So that's if you want to see if, for example, any of your leads are in contacts, or any leads are in accounts, or if you want to compare across objects, you can do that using cross-object data set. Anyway, once you have a data set created and the analysis is finished, you'll see this little red coin here. And what the red coin means is how many duplicate groups we found. So we'll go to contacts, and you can see we give each group a name. We give it a match confidence between 1 and 100 on how certain we are that they're duplicates. And we tell you how many records are in that group. You can preview it by just clicking on it, and we'll retrieve the data and preview that data for you. If you really want to compare it side by side, you press the review button, and we actually show you the record side by side. Anything in red means that it's not the same as the master record. So first thing you can do here is, if you don't like the master record we selected, you can select your own. So you click on it and say, well, I want to use this one, and it will swap sides. You can also, for example, if you have several records here and there's some you don't want to include in the merging process, you can uncheck it. It'll be grayed out. If you want to copy data from other records, let's say you want to replace this Jeff with this Jeff, you can just click on it, it'll replace it, or click on it again, it will go away. And you can also edit in line. So you can come in and say, well, I know this address is wrong. It is actually in a suite. So you can go ahead and add that. So that's basically, you're preparing this record to be, or this match group to be merged, so for these records to go away. There's some other convenience factors here as well. I'm not going to delay time on it, but basically, once you're comfortable with what you did here, there's 2 buttons that are important: merge and unmatch. So the reason these 2 buttons are important is because this is our feedback loop. So when you press merge, you're telling us that, look, this group that you found, it's actually duplicate. So you did a great job. Unmatched means the opposite. So we need to we basically constantly adjusting based on what you do with this merge and unmatch. Once you, and the other 2 objects obviously are for moving forward or for canceling this as well. But if you do press merge or unmatch, it will just go to the next group, and you can start with that. That's a manual merge, which is great if you find 15 duplicate groups. If you find thousands, that becomes somewhat impractical to go through every single group unless you have nothing better to do than remove duplicates. So what we do offer is a mass merge option. So so the mass merge option works by you selecting the minimum confidence above which the records will be merged. So the nice thing about this is if you do some review of, if you have thousands and thousands of duplicate groups, if you review a few of them and you say, well, you know, anything over, let's say, 98% confidence level, it's guaranteed to be a duplicate. So you can select it here. Again, you can change the rules for merging here if you don't like the ones that are default. Press merge all, and the system will just merge all the records for you. So you don't have to look at them one by one. We do also have a scheduler module. I'll just touch base on that now. What you can do in a scheduler module is add jobs. So if you want to create a mass merge job that will run completely in an automated way, give it a name, select that as an action here, press next. Again, select a confidence level. You can actually select multiple data sets here that you want to merge. Press next, and then you create a schedule. When do you want it to run? So you can say, well, I want it to run, you know, tomorrow. And if you want it to repeat every Friday, you just press recurring and say recur once a week. If you want it to happen every day, you can say every day or every hour. I don't think you want to merge every hour, but so you can create basically an automated way for this to merge your records without you actually even being involved, if you really want to do that. So that's about it for the merge. So this works. Trimmer works exclusively with data that's already in Salesforce. So, however, sometimes there's a need to work with data that's not currently in Salesforce, but that you want to import into Salesforce. So we have this handy dandy importer module, and the importer module works just like Trimmer does, except it doesn't actually import anything. It loads your data and then it compares it to Salesforce and sees if there's any duplicates. So it prevents duplicates from going in through imports. The way that works is that you press the upload button, select the name of your duplicate file. I have this one, which I know is always a duplicate, has duplicates in it. Select where you want it to import, press next. We will automatically map the fields from the CSV file. If there's any we can't find, you'll see them in red here, and you can map them manually. We show you a little preview of the first few records in your CSV. Press next, press confirm. As I said, you're not importing anything into Salesforce. All you're doing is a comparison, so there's really no danger to doing this. You can run this at any point, and it will just give you information about what the duplicate status of your CSV is. So this is being analyzed here. It takes about a minute to do this. I already did this before, and for the sake of time, I'll show you this data set, which is the same thing. So when the analysis is complete, you'll see 3 buckets: unmatched records, which means no duplicates at all; matched records, which means we found duplicates; and imported records. So if you do use us to import into Salesforce, they'll be dropped. The records will be dropped into this bucket automatically. So unmatched records means no duplicates. So you can, if you want to, you can mass import them, or you can import them individually, or several at a time by pressing the import button. Or we also allow you to export. So you can export either matched or unmatched data back to CSV. What this is primarily used for is for match records. So if you do have a lot of duplicates and you want to send it back to whoever gave you this information, you can export this data and say, look, these are all duplicates. But the nice thing with duplicates is that we actually give you some other abilities. So for example, for this Claire Kelly person, I'm going to review it. This is my Salesforce record here, and this is my CSV record here. And as you can see, there's some differences. So for example, Claire used to be in customer service, but it looks like she got promoted to customer service manager, and that would be nice to have. That's new information. So what you can do is you can click on it, it will copy it into this record, and then you can press update, and we'll actually update Salesforce for you. So rather than just basically throwing away any duplicates that you have, you can sort of use that data, especially some important data, and enrich your existing Salesforce data. But the basic model that's used to do this comparison is exactly the same one that you use in Trimmer. It's machine learning, nothing for you to do. It'll just go through and do a comparison and tell you that something is a duplicate or not. So that's the importer module. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to a little bit more, something that's a little bit more complex. So again, we try to keep it very basic, but there are some things that you may want to do that are a little bit more advanced, and we usually put that in the supervisor module. I talked to you a little bit about these merge rules and matching rules, so I'm going to start with them. And if I have time, I'll talk about transform rules as well. I probably won't, but I'll mention it at least. So merge rules, so all the rules that we have for merge rules, we use this little graphical interface to create a rule. So it looks like this. There's a little graphical rules designer. We give you these little tabs on the side. So we've already created some rules for you that are common use. If you want to use any of them, you just drag it over here. And if you don't want to use it, you just drop it. So that's Visual Designer. We also give you a little preview window. This is dummy data that you have in the system. But if you change anything, like for example, if I change it from ascending to, from descending to ascending, you'll see that it will change based on the data here. So it kind of gives you an idea what's going to happen based on a rule change. But basically this is our out of the box rule for creating a master record. So it says, sort the group by the score in descending order and set the master to the very first record. And that's what this did. The problem is we have two records here that have exactly the same score. So the system arbitrarily decided that this record will be the master record. That's nice, but you might want to add sort of a tiebreaker condition. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to use annual revenue. I'm going to add that field. So it's added here and it becomes available for me to use here, for example, as annual revenue. But what I want to do is I want to keep the score as my primary, but I want to use the annual revenue as my secondary. So I grab that function, drop it in, it connects. All the fields are shown here as well, but I actually want to use annual revenue in descending order. So I want the highest, but right now it's ascending. So you can see it shows this record. And if I change it to descending, it'll swap. So now it shows this record. So this is what it takes to build a rule. And, you know, they can get a little bit more complicated, but basically it's a visual designer. Once you design the rule, you can apply it to any of your data sets that you've created. So the master record selection rules are pretty standard. The field value can get a little bit more complicated. So this is a default one, which is the same one that's used by Salesforce. So it says, if you find an empty field, populate it with the value from the most recently modified record of the same field. That's pretty straightforward. That's the one we give you, but you can get pretty creative with these things. So here's one I created for demos. Never one that you would actually use, but what it does, for example, it says here, look, whenever you have a company field, which is a string field, concatenate or join all the values separated by a semicolon. So if you look at the result, here's our company field. What it did is it took the name of this company, the name of this company, name of this company, and this one, and joined them together. And that's the result you had. For numeric fields, we can do some really cool things. Like obviously we can, you know, do the highest value, we can do the lowest value, but you can also do average values. So you can do mathematics here and you can do sum. I think I had that originally. So you can apply math functions to these things. So you can really automate how your master record will be done or will be created. And once you have it sort of automated, you can do mass merges. You don't have to do this by hand. And these rules can get pretty complicated. We created, I think this one a couple of days ago for a customer because they needed some pretty fancy logic. But as you can see, we can use if-do loops and all kinds of things. If you ever do need help, if you use our product and you need some help with creating any of these rules, just let us know. We're happy to jump on a call and do it for you. So that's merge rules. Let me switch over to matching rules. So the interesting thing about matching rules, again, they're not matching rules, but this is where we build actual models for you to use. So you can add any object you have in Salesforce. This will actually show you all your objects. You can add it here, and then you can go ahead and click on it and create models. So I've already played around with this one. For speed's sake, I'm going to show you this one. So right now, so there are a bunch of models that are already here, but if you want to create a new model, you press this add model option. There's two steps to adding a model. That's it. First step is you add all the fields that are important to you. So the process here is simple. So if you were going to look at records side by side, which fields would you look at to compare duplicates? That's all we're asking here. And the more the merrier. So if if there's some fields that you look at specifically, and then some other ones are sort of like tiebreakers or somewhat down the road, add them all, because the system will adjust the weight to those fields as you train the model and as you use the model. So you can add all those fields here. We also give you access. So for the ones that we do have models, we give you access to the ones that we created. Also, if you've created any deduplication rules in Salesforce, they'll be shown here as well. So you can load them. Let's say you want to use hours, you can click on it. We will load all those fields here for you. You can look through them, you can delete. We assign a suggested compare logic, but if you don't like our compare logic, like sometimes people want exact emails, you can go ahead and click on this, and there's an option here to select an exact compare. I don't advise this, but you can do it. Once you have these fields selected, you press train. And when you press train, our system will go through and look at your data. So that's what's going to be different about our model versus your model. It will start looking for your data in your data for duplicates. And this process depends on how much data you have, may take 30 seconds, may take 30 minutes, but you don't have to sit and wait. Once it's done, you'll get an update and it will say ready for training. So when it's ready for training, you can open it up and you'll see something like this. So basically what we're doing is the system found 2 records, and it says, well, I think these might be duplicates, and it shows you them side by side, and you have 3 options. You can say, yeah, they are duplicates. No, they're not duplicates, or not sure, at which point it will suggest something else. So this is the process of training the model. So this is a very important part, because if you make mistakes here, the model will follow whatever you taught it. So it's important to try to be careful and train this. What we do is we give you a little guide here. So we would prefer, in this one, it says it recommends 35 yeses and 35 nos for the model to be completely trained. We basically ask you for 5 yes, 5 no's for every field. So there's 7 fields here. And once this model is trained, it will be set to the status trained. So once you're finished with this ready for training, the system will actually create an algorithm. And once you have an algorithm, you can assign it to any data set that applies to. So basically, this is for context, so we can assign it to this data set and this data set. You can also create, sometimes people want to compare how our model does with their models, so they'll create a secondary data set, call it contacts with my model, and they'll assign that model, and they'll see how we compare side by side. So I'm running out of time, but just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. So we have this brusher module here. It's pretty recent. It's been probably out for about a month. So brusher is a little different. It's not designed for deduplication. It's more oriented towards data quality. So if you create a data set, just like in the other modules, we will evaluate it for data quality. So we have a neural network that goes through, looks through all your data, sees how complete it is, how relevant it is, do addresses match, the phone numbers and things like that. And we will assign a data quality score to it. The other thing you can do here is you can do verification. So we allow you, for example, if you have a phone number or you have an email address, you can go ahead and verify. So we give you some free credits for using this, but if you want to do a lot, you can buy some credits for this, and we'll tell you whether the phone number is valid or invalid. We also do that for emails. So, and the mailing address is coming soon. Whenever you do this validation, it will adjust this data quality score as well. Sometimes when we do email validations, we come up with suggestions. So even though this email is invalid, we found something that we think is valid, and you can press on it and you'll see that, look, this one's invalid, but this one is valid. Do you want to replace it? So Ben happens to work for Data Groomer, so we put this one in specifically. But again, this kind of allows you to assign a data quality score. And after you have a data quality score, we allow you also to do some bulk functions. So one of them is mass delete. So you can go ahead and say, well, if the data quality score is below a certain level, I just want to delete them all. And you can do that. So you can clean the junk out of your system using this module. We also have a mass transform, which allows you to do transformation of data. So anything like phone numbers, to make sure they're all in the same format, uppercase, lowercase, trying to think, addresses, postal codes. So we have transform rules. They're available here out of the box, and we're building new ones all the time. So you can apply that to any field, and we will do an update on that field to conform with whatever rule you create. What else? So a couple other things. So you can find, you can go to our website. We provide pricing there if you're interested. The trial is free, so you can go in. We will do an analysis of your environment and tell you how many duplicates you have in leads, contacts, and accounts. No charge for that at all. If you do want to purchase the product, we price it based on how many records you use. And there's 2 versions. Well, if you have over 1 million, there's only 1 version, but there's 2 versions, basically a pro or a standard, and we'll tell you what's included or not included in each one. I think I'd like to stop there and see if there's any questions.
There
Usually,
are a lot of questions.
okay. All right, good.
So we will do like that because we have a lot of questions, not that amount of time, and we have also the lovely quiz. I will choose 3 questions to ask. The rest, Steve, is it okay if we send you by email tomorrow the rest of the questions, and then we can publish them on our user group meeting as attachment?
You'll probably get better answers tomorrow too. So yes.
So if really sorry people, if I didn't choose your question right now, but there is like 12 questions at the chat, so we would have to have another amount of time, longer meetings to answer them all, and we have another presentation. So first question is what's the maximum number of records that can be imported through CSV to be analyzed?
So we've tested it with 5 million. So we're better than Data Loader. So we've tested it with 5 million with no problems.
Okay, before buying the licenses, is it possible to know on the mass assignment feature how many results on exactly 100 accuracy we may get or not?
Say that again one more time, just.
Okay, I'm just reading. So, if not,
which one?
Panos, you want to ask your questions yourself? Maybe I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I was just wondering, before we purchase a license, is it possible to see like what will be the accuracy on our data? Because my org, for example, has millions too, right? So we will go for mass. But if the mass confidence is 50%, is not something we can automate, right?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, you can. So if you go to the trial, we will analyze all your data, right? So we will do that analysis for you. If you have millions of records, I'll tell you now, you should create your own model. So you should go to this matching or create your own model, because you have enough data to train it yourself. You don't need our data, but we will evaluate it and you will see the same information. You can sort it by match confidence and you can see how many records. So the other thing you can do in a data set, you can see what the minimum match confidence that you'll see. So you can say, I only want to see anything over, let's say 80%. So you don't have to see stuff that's low. If you have hundreds of thousands of duplicates, you don't want to see them. So you want to see like 10,000, something that's workable in most cases.
Thanks.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Sometimes I'm bad at reading the questions. This one should be easy. What is the minimum data records needed to create a good model?
Oh, that's a good question. So it depends on the object. So we do really, and I'll be totally transparent, we do a really good job for leads and contacts, right? So I would say if you want to create your model for leads and contacts, I would want at least 500,000. If for accounts, there's so many different ways to use accounts. So we do our best, but I would say if you have 100,000 objects for accounts, I would train my own model. And then you can train it and compare it side by side, see which one is better. You don't lose one by creating the other. So, but that's a good question. Yeah.
Last questions, because there's 4 people really interested, it looks like. So can you give a weight to certain fields? Like, for example, I noticed all Jeffs were from Toronto, but the streets didn't match if one Jeff lived in another city, and the remainder of the addresses should have less weight, in my opinion. So can you weight the fields that you're choosing?
Well, that's not how machine learning works. So no, it will create the weight for you. What you can do is you can create filters. So you can exclude certain things. So you can train a model based on a filtered version of the data. You don't have to train it on all your data. And what you can do is adjust the weight then. We can't allow you to modify the model itself once it's created, but you can teach, it will learn based on that over time. And again, there's ways to sort of, this is something I'd have to show. I have to spend like 10 minutes to show how to do this, but there is a way to sort of solve this weighting problem in a different way. And so the answer is not directly, but yes, there is, right? I'm trying to sit on both sides of the fence at this point. So.
Okay, thank you. So for the moment, we'll stop the questions. I copied all the questions from the chatter. So to make sure that, Steve, can you just quickly go to the slide with your email in case people still want to write it down, please?
Yeah.
If they want to contact, because there is a lot of questions and we don't have that many questions so many times. So I want to make sure that people have possibility. I'm copying all questions from the chatter to make sure that we will to send you that tomorrow. But in case.
Yeah, I copied all the questions so far, and
Okay.
if there's some extra ones, yeah, I'll try to answer them. Just
can
send
you
them
maybe
over
put your email or in chatter, or quickly come back to the slides with your how to reach you, and then we will progress with the quiz, people who were listening. Yeah. And Steve Lovely put his email address in the chatter, so if someone wants to reach out to him, it's possible. Thank you so much. So, and thank you for a lovely presentation. That was really a lot of data to process, but it was really, really interesting. And looking at the amount of questions we got, people are interested in it too.
Thank you.
So then I will try to proceed we have only 3 questions, people, so it should, and I lost what is that? Okay, where are you guys? Here, share screen. Yep. So again, grab your mobile phone, go to www.menti.com, and this time the code is 69245440. And this time I don't see any faces on the screen, so please shout if you cannot hear me, if I'm doing something wrong, because it's really, I think I can even go to the first slide to see how many people do we have. Yeah, we have 10 people. Let's 11. No more courageous people to see if they listen. Remember, it's only 2 questions. And I will count to 5, and if no one is shouting, I will proceed. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm starting. So, as always, who's fast? What is the benefit of AI machine learning for duplicate management? Efficient with large data sets, no need to maintain rules, normalization not required, all of the above. If you know it, it was mentioned. Woohoo, 12 people made it. Very well done. Let's see how the situation is looking. And woohoo, ask me. Very well. Next question. Up. And next question is, what task can machine learning not do? Not do. Discover complex patterns, learn as it progresses, make a cup of coffee, teach computers to think similar to humans. Da, 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 da. Woohoo! Machine learning can teach computers to think similar to humans. The cup of coffee is a little bit difficult. Well done, 16 people. And how does it look? We have Abbas as the first place and Niels as at the second fastest. So the last third question. Ready, steady, go. Approximately what percentage of leads contain bad data? Less than 10%, 100%, about 40%, exactly 87%. I would say I'm not the answer, but I was doing this quiz with Steve and the company. So what people thinking? How does it look? Yeah, 13% were correct. About 40% of data, 40% of leads contain bad data. So let's see how does it look. We need to have like the things to have the Niels and Metal. So can I Niels, who is Metal? I'm sorry. Can you say you with us, right? Can you
Moira,
just...
yes, sorry.
Moira, it's hidden, but it's good. So Niels and Moira, could you please send me your emails by chatter? I know that I should have them, but just in case,
Sure.
to make
Thank
sure
you.
that we can contact you. So we will forward your emails to our lovely sponsor, and they will come back to you because we have 2 surprise vouchers for Amazon. So congratulations, people.
Thank you very much. Looking
Thank
forward.
you.
So thank you again, Steve, for a lovely presentation and this possibility for to present another quiz, another games. And then I think, so questions are taken from the chat. I will still send them to Steve, even if he copy pasted them already, to make sure that we have everything, and we'll try to post them